you start by following a guy named Matt Holland who lives in Spring Hill, Florida. He was arrested and spent some time in prison for breaking into cars with friends to steal stereos. But the big issue was he was facing state court fees, and then this metastasized. Tell us about this story and how it's indicative of a major problem in many states across the country.
Well, this is a story by the Daily Poster's Walker Bragman, and it's a story that we've been following as On the Whole, which is the debt collection industry. And I think people don't think about it as a whole industry, but it really is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And the story at the beginning of that piece of our latest reporting on this is a story about a guy who essentially just gets buried under more and more court fees, which snowball. And this is not an isolated incident. We are living in a country now where at least, and I want to underscore at least, where $27 billion of outstanding court debt is now out there. These are fees related to if you're appearing in front of a court, anything from municipal violations to fines to everything that is related to a person being in front of the judicial system. $27 billion of outstanding court debt. And the story is not just about that debt. It's about the fact that state and local governments, and by the way, the IRS, are starting to hire for-profit debt collectors to collect that debt. Now, the one of the most unbelievable things about this is that you have an IRS that has seen its budget slashed. It is reducing audits of millionaires. Okay, so essentially, in using the lingo, it is reducing its debt collection efforts against very, very rich people at a time when we know the estimates are that the top 1% is not paying somewhere between $174 billion and $250 billion a year in owed but unpaid taxes. So on one hand, you have the debt collection part of government essentially reducing its effort to collect that debt from the top 1%, while also hiring for-profit debt collectors to go out and try to collect $27 billion worth of outstanding court fees. And here's the thing, when you hire a for-profit debt collector, what you're doing is in many cases, these debt collectors are allowed to attach additional fees onto the fees that people owe. Additional fees essentially to pay the profits or boost the profits of the debt collector themselves, anywhere from 25% to 40%. So if you're somebody who has outstanding fees and you get one of these private debt collectors on you, you're not only going to necessarily pay the fees, you're going to have to pay the fee of the debt collector as well to pad their profits. This is happening in states across the country.
And we should say, I mean, you just touched on the IRS. I mean, I think the calculations, the IRS commissioner has said something to the effect of, I believe it's for every dollar spent on enforcement with the IRS, I think there's a $6 return. I think it is maybe.
Yeah.
And when they get those debt collectors, of course, they're not going after, like you say, the 1% at that point. They're going after those people who don't have the means in which to legally challenge the debt collectors, to put up a fight in any respect. And that dynamic is also sort of mirrored on the state level. And so here is, you talk about or I should say, Walter writes about Linebarger. Tell us about Linebarger.
So Linebarger is one of the major, probably the most major debt collecting firms in the country. It has signed up with scores of state and local governments to collect debts on behalf of those state and local governments. The estimate is that company, Linebarger, has revenues of somewhere between $200 million and $500 million a year. And at one point, a decade ago, when it started getting into this business, it said that it saw a prospect of collecting $1 billion in outstanding revenue in just 1 year alone. Now, look, the argument here is from state and local officials is, look, we have to get this debt collected. Our operations, the state legislators and the city governments have made our operations the funding of our operations based on collecting these fees. So hiring a private debt collector is just a cheaper, more efficient way to go get the money that we need, that the laws make us rely on to run, let's say, the court system. But here's the other part of it, which is just an incredibly kind of mind-blowing part of this, which is that private debt collectors operating on behalf of a state or local government are not really subject to the same debtor protection laws as private debt collectors who are collecting debts on behalf of corporate clients. So by that, I mean that a private debt collector collecting traffic fines, let's say, outstanding traffic fines on behalf of a city government, actually in practice, in many cases, has more of an ability to harass the debtor legally than that private debt collector might have if they were collecting on behalf of a bank, because of essentially a loophole in the debt collection laws that are supposed to protect consumers. Now, Congress has started considering essentially closing that loophole, but the debt collection industry, it is an industry, it has been furiously lobbying to prevent that from happening. It has been pumping campaign contributions to lawmakers. It is trying to prevent even that small loophole from being closed.
Do we know if these debt collectors are ultimately less expensive for the government? I mean, so it's set up where these state governments say you can basically charge the subject of the fees for all of your expenses and
Right.
your profits. So they'll tack on fees of 40%. Do we really know if, let's say, I owe the state of New York $100, and I haven't been able to get that, but at one point, maybe 3 or 4 months down the road, I'll have saved up and have that extra money. But by the time I get to that point, my bill is now $140 because of this fee. I am less inclined to pay that because I don't have $140, and that is just simply too much. I mean, do they have data? Because I know that in other contexts, when we see this type of privatization by state governments, by federal governments for that matter, it ends up, I mean, this is the argument for private prisons too, right? It's going to be cheaper but ultimately it's not. I wonder, do they have data that show that they're more effective as debt collectors than maybe the state would be in and of itself?
Here's the problem. A lot of the data is hard to come by. It's not standardized. When I said $27 billion, that's among the states and municipal governments that even disclose how much outstanding debt there really is. So essentially what private debt collectors allow state and local governments to do is to not spend upfront the public's money to collect the fees. It essentially creates a for-profit incentive for the private debt collector to collect those fees without charging the public the money up front.
And in the piece, Lineberger's estimated annual revenue is between $100 and $500 million.
Right.
And it was also, I guess, we're talking about doing a tremendous amount of damage to lower income Americans. I mean, the idea of 40% fees is extraordinary when we know how much people living in the, I don't know, at poverty, even within like 150%, 50%, 200%, 400% poverty have in terms of disposable income. Hi, I'm Sam Seder. You can watch the rest of this interview and more on our Peacock show, which streams at 5 p.m. weekdays on The Choice from Peacock TV.